I am Lorianne. I am the urban forestry specialist for the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. And I'm also the executive director of the Arizona Master Naturalist Association and the Arizona Association for Environmental Education. And in my mind, all of those things are connected because what we're doing, or what I do most often, is communicate with people in our communities in Arizona about educating folks and about natural and cultural history. So the role of the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management is really just to manage those natural resources that we have in our state. And it also has underneath the Department of Forestry several programs that we facilitate. And those are listed there on the screen. So we have a forest stewardship program, a forest legacy program, a forest and woodland health program, and an urban and community forestry program. So that kind of covers the gamut of the natural resources that we call forests in the state of Arizona, which is vast and very wide ranging. As most of you probably know, Arizona has many, many different ecosystems, elevationally and also latitudinally. And forests look different in all of those places, including in the urban space. So what we want to do in our urban and community forestry program is make sure that we're working with partners, which are organizational partners or community members, to build healthy and sustainable communities by promoting urban forestry awareness and by fostering local action. So educating for action is the name of the game. And as the urban forestry specialist, I get to do a lot of fun things. I actually work at the intersection of kind of forestry and science and social engagement. And so we provide a lot of technical assistance. So if people have questions about their trees or their tree health, either myself or one of my colleagues like Allie McAlexander, who some of you went to our bark beetle talk the other night, we can answer your questions that you have about caring for trees on your property. We also have a number of grant programs that we administer, everything from invasive species that are often really top dollar, the grants for programs to apply for to abate things like bufflegrass and stinknet. But we have community challenge grants, which is what falls under the urban forestry program, that many partners with master natural programs also are recipients of the funding dollars to improve some of their spaces, their urban space. And that includes dollars for tree planting or education and outreach related to mitigating the urban heat island effects in our big cities, especially in Southern Arizona and Phoenix and Yuma and in Tucson. And a lot of great programs have come out of that. So I encourage you to take a look at some of that information on our website. If you work with partners that are interested in applying for some funding for these projects, our next grant round will be available this fall. And the theme for the Community Challenge Grant Program is going to be using technology. So keep an eye out for that. I'll send it to all my lists when it's ready, and we can share that with you. And, I think it's really important that we also just educate everyone about the benefits of trees around us. And trees in the Sonoran Desert look a lot different than they do in Northern Arizona, obviously, but they are still very critical to keeping that temperature down and really just kind of preserving the environment. You don't have to travel really far away to be immersed in forest or green space. And we've got a couple of other programs that are cooking that if you know me, I can't just sit and do grant administration. I have to come up with some other things. So the Magnificent Tree Program that you all are going to hear about in minutes is one of them. I took that over from my predecessor, John Arona, who I'm not sure if he's on the call. Shout out to John if he is. He signed up for it, but I can certainly fill him in, or if he has questions that you all have for him. He moved up to a district forester position up in Show Low, but he was working on this Magnificent Tree Program really so he's remaining engaged in that and helping us on our advisory board. So we're really excited about taking this project to the next level. The other stuff that we're working on in our urban and community program is the City Forester program, or a citizen forester program, which is designed to be kind of a short teach community members about best practice when planting and caring for trees on their property. And we are designing a manual, an instructor manual for people who are interested in facilitating that. So there's several communities around Arizona that already have a community or citizen forester program that we're connecting with, and several others are interested in piloting something like that in the near future. So the Department of Forestry has set aside some funding dollars to create an instructor manual or curriculum guide for people that want to run that kind of program. And then they are going to partner with the Arizona Master Naturalist Association to kind of curate a database of people that have this certification or designation, so that those folks can go and volunteer for other organizations that need help with people leading tree plantings or educating homeowners or neighborhood associations, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in doing that, then look for some more information about that pretty soon. We'll send it out as soon as we've got it ready. I think we're going to do a couple of pilots of that in the fall. And you all will be the first on my list to get that notification for sure. We also do a lot of mentoring college students. I do that a lot, or people that are interested in careers in forestry or urban and community forestry. And again, we've instituted now a volunteer program that I am participating as the urban forestry specialist. We've used volunteers for our bark beetle project quite successfully. Big shout out to Kat Ballman and a couple other people who helped us with that last summer, and they're going to help us this summer again. And then I think, that pretty much covers the gamut of what I do on a daily basis, just getting people out there, working with agencies and municipalities to better understand what, trees are going to be the best ones to have in the urban spaces. For Phoenix and Tucson, they both have initiatives to plant 1 million trees in the next decade or so. And so teaching people about them and helping them to maintain them, because it's more than just getting them in the ground. It's also about caring for them so that they grow up and that they're also the ones that are well adapted to desert ecosystems, especially in the Sonoran Desert. That's going to be really critical to make sure that we're reducing that urban heat island effect. And just a quick top level view of what is urban forestry. Well, it really just has to do with the care and the management of trees, planted trees, and also naturally occurring trees in urban areas. And urban areas are cities and towns that have a lot of hardscape. And so if you know anything about how it works, those areas really retain a lot of heat, especially here in Arizona, because the summers are hot and the sun is very hot where we are. And so that's a lot of heat comes off of those buildings. And when you have green space or green infrastructure, as it's called, that's installed around the city, it really does work to, serve as a cooling effect on the buildings. And it also serves to clean the air. So trees and plants absorb carbon dioxide, and that is also helping reduce the effects of climate change. And then the other little bit of urban and community forestry is arboriculture, which is basically the cultivation and management of trees. So once you, again, get them in the ground, it's about watering them and caring for them, but it's also thinking about pruning them and, managing that space so that they do last as long as they possibly can. The average lifespan for is somewhere between 30 and 50 years, depending on where it is. You can imagine that sometimes the lifespan is going to be a lot less than that in a heavily trafficked area, because those urban environments are very disturbed places, if we can say that. And trees really do need a lot of space with their roots. And you will find that if you're planting a tree in your yard, the case may be that the roots for that tree extend well beyond your property, especially if you live in town. And so, things can be happening beyond your property wall to the tree that you have planted there, and it's going to affect the health of your tree. So maybe that's a reason to knock on your neighbor's door and make friends with your neighbor, just to say, hey, can we collaborate on caring for our natural space in our yard? Because I don't want you to be digging and ruining my tree without at least alerting me. So us being part of an ecosystem, and that's the humans included. The humans are part of that ecosystem, and they're a really critical part. We had a great conversation last night in our Master Naturalist class, where I presented the urban forestry class about, the effects of humans and how we've sort of manufactured our environment in a lot of ways, especially Western science folks who have been kind of I don't know, mitigating and designing things for human benefit instead of necessarily considering all of the people and all of the native plants and animals that are part of your ecosystem, and what has that done to our environment. And now we're left with having to mitigate it again. And that's a lot of what urban forestry has to do with. And here in Arizona, our land area that has the urban population is very small compared to the geographic size of our state. I mean, you all know how big our state is. And there's, probably about 4 million people that live in just 5% of the land area. So all of those people are living in urban areas. And that's exactly why we want to give a think to how we can better serve our native ecosystems in town to improve the quality of life for people, especially in those underserved areas of town where maybe people don't have as many trees. We see that pretty often in lower income areas where there's been tons of studies about tree equity, and I can send you some information about that. That's a little tangential to this presentation, but making sure that everybody has equal access to trees and green space in order to really keep that urban heat island down, and thinking about the benefits that trees and green space provide to people when they have access to them. There's documented evidence that trees and green space really increases people's mental benefits. Thinking about, having access to trees, there's studies that have been done where people can view trees from their hospital bed. For example, the recovery period is a lot faster than somebody that doesn't have a window or doesn't have access to that. We see improvements in people's mental health, a reduction in crime, and the economic benefits are really vast. The trees that are planted on your property could increase property values by $1,000 just by having that tree there, because it's much more aesthetically pleasing to have trees and greenery around your houses and around your workplaces than it is to have kind of a barren environment. And I think that, also, again, it's really replacing that native ecosystem. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, it does control the air quality and serves to reduce heating and cooling costs in the summer and the winter, which are definitely rising here as we are experiencing a lot hotter of an environment. So that's kind of an overview of urban forestry in a nutshell, 5 minutes or less. I could talk about that for a really long time, but I know you all are here to learn about the Arizona Magnificent Tree Program. And I see it as a direct link to engaging people in understanding trees, learning how to identify trees, and also seeking out trees that are really sort of significant and magnificent in our ecosystems in Arizona. I think it's really a great way to teach people about the environment. I've always been an advocate of having people know the most frequently occurring 10 native trees that you see in whatever community you are. In place-based education is really important to me, because that's when people are really going to understand where they come from, understand their communities and the cultural connections to them, and also have an affinity for caring for the environment. So it's really about place-based education and learning as much as you can about the trees that we are celebrating in our communities. So the Arizona Magnificent Tree Program was started in 2000, and it was originally a project that was run by the Arizona Community Tree Council, the Arizona Native Plant Society, and what was previously my department was called the Arizona State Forestry. And so those three entities worked together to develop a database of trees that were significant across the whole state. And it was based on a program that is run by the American Forests, and they have a magnificent or champion tree program that has been around since the 1940s. And that has always been a way to engage people in the natural world. In Virginia, where I was previous to here in Arizona, I worked a lot with our Department of Forestry there on their Remarkable Trees program, which was the same thing. It was based on this champion tree program. And, people have been seeking out these big trees since the 1940s, if not earlier. That's when we started documenting them. And what we do when we seek out the big champion trees, we're looking for the largest of each species and the most magnificent that we can find anywhere in our communities or in our forests. And to do that, we're going to take a couple of measurements of the tree. So you can see on the slide there, the three variables that we look for to kind of measure the big trees are the circumference, the height, and the crown spread. Those are the three things that we need to document. And then we give the trees a score. And then the highest scoring trees are the ones that are ranked in either our state database or the American Forest database. And again, this just really brings awareness to the trees that we have in our communities. And it's interesting that it also helps you kind of visualize like how tall 85 feet is, for example. I have a eucalyptus tree that's in my neighbor's yard 2 yards over, and it's easily 85 feet in comparison to the sweet acacia tree that I have in my front yard that's about 35 feet. So we don't typically see trees that large in our Sonoran Desert just because that's not really a desert adapted species. But you know, people had planted them 50, 70 years ago, and they're still here in town. The same thing with those Aleppo pines. And a lot of those large trees now are becoming stressed just because, again, of the heat and the compaction of the soil. They're just not really suited to this environment. But I think they are something to celebrate in our communities where we have them while we have them, and taking them down, of course, is going to be a whole other task. So right now on our Arizona Champion Tree List, we have 143 trees that are either nationally recognized or recognized as an Arizona champion. And the interesting thing is that in the American Forest database, they kind of have a very selective list of trees that they are including, the tree species they're including. And I'm not 100% sure why that is, other than I think that it just becomes really hard to manage. My previous job that I had was with the National Phenology Network, and we had a database of species that people could monitor, and people were, you know, entering observations on different phenophases, which are the life cycle events with the leaves and flowers. And the larger your database is with all the species, the harder it is to actually manage that information, especially if people are, you know, adding something to the database, but you're never going to find that other thing somewhere else. So that's why they also don't have cultivars or things like that in the American Forest database right now. I just think they thought it would be too much to manage, and they wanted to keep it a little tighter so that the database was easier to work with. But in Arizona, we don't have those parameters. Our advisory board met, and we decided that for now, we're going to allow anybody to add any species or cultivar that they find if it's large and worthy of recognition. And we'll keep headed in that direction until somebody tells us differently, that we can't manage it anymore, or it just becomes too unwieldy. And
Lori, we have a question.
oh, yes.
So
Sorry.
the landscape non-native trees, are they included?
Yes.
Okay.
In Arizona, they are. They may not be available for the stuff to enter on the American Forest database, but we can certainly enter them right now in our Arizona database. I think what we're doing, and we're still kind of working through some of the stuff to try to figure out a little bit more a guideline for everybody, is if you are nominating something that is that is not already on the list as a champion, if you're the first nomination of that, your tree will be kind of an uncontested champion until somebody can find another one. And if there just doesn't happen to be another nomination, then your tree is going to be a champion until something else challenges it. But there are some, as I said, there's 143 trees already on the list of varying species. So it could be that something that you're nominating is already on the list, and it would have to see if it's bigger than the one that's already in there. So that's kind of how we're going to proceed. But in my mind, again, I think it's something that is worth just leaving it open for now, because it does cultivate that appreciation for the trees. So thanks for the question, Kathy. Anybody else have any other questions about that sort of high level description that I just gave you?
There's nothing in the chat.
Okay, I'll press on. So the other thing that we recognize in our Magnificent Tree program are what we call heritage trees and witness trees. And heritage trees are actually ones that have a cultural significance to a community or a group of people, or a property owner. And what we look for is not necessarily the biggest, like physical size one of that particular species, but a story that goes with it. So I think this is really a great way to encourage people to think about the benefit that the tree has had in its community space. We don't have a ton of parameters on what that means. So we're looking for people to really tell us how that tree enhances a community space. It's probably something that needs to be there for a little while. I mean, it can't be the brand new acacia tree that I planted in my front yard last March, because that doesn't really have a story yet, right? If it's attached to a significant person or an event or something like that, a great candidate for a heritage tree. If things that were happening around that tree is something that you could tell a story about, then that would be something that would be a great contender for that. And the witness trees that we have are similar to that. So they should have a story because they're culturally significant. But what witness trees are the ones that were in place when Arizona became a state in 1912. And so that, indicates that the tree has been in that place for how many years is that now? I lost a couple years in the pandemic, but 100, almost 110 years. Am I right? 110 years, 1912. Somebody do the math on that, but that's a long time. And so, if there's pictures or historical records that you can find that are documenting that tree in that space and that community for that period of time, they can be a heritage tree and a witness tree at the same time. So those are the two distinctions between those cultural trees. And again, we do take measurements on them too, just because why not? We're measuring things. And some of the heritage trees also are doubling as champion trees because they are the biggest of their species that we've got submitted. Okay. And then the next thing that we do is every year in April, the governor designates one day as Arbor Day. And this year it's going to be April 22nd. We are going to have an Arbor Day celebration online, and we can send you all the information about that if you want to tune in. That is also the time when we award the awards that we have for the year, the other recognition programs that we have, which include our, we have a Citizen Forester Award and a couple other designations. We've also got tree cities across the state of Arizona. I think we're up to about 32 tree cities. And a tree city is one that has done a lot of work and has a master tree plan to make sure that they are using that urban space and creating it as tree worthy as possible. They also have to have a proclamation from their city council that says that they're going to do an Arbor Day celebration, things like that. It's an Arbor Day Foundation program that we manage, and my colleague Megan is the one that's in charge of that now. And so she's going to be running that Arbor Day celebration on the 22nd online. But what we also do is we recognize 7 of the most magnificent trees that were submitted in the prior year. And we highlight that for folks so that they can see what this program is all about, what this award recognition program is all about, and just give them a taste of some of the trees that had been nominated in the prior year. And so I'm going to share with you in the next couple slides the last year's Magnificent 7. And we came up with 7 because there was a movie that was filmed in Arizona that was called The Magnificent 7, and that's where they got that name from. So 7 trees. We try to pick ones that are a mix of champion trees and heritage trees. And admittedly, we typically get more nominations for champions than we do of the other 2. But, that could be a point in time where I'm pushing the heritage tree program so much that because I'm interested in the cultural significance that maybe that'll be flipped. So we'll see. So we had a netleaf hackberry, which you can see pictured here. This is a slide that I used for our presentation last year. I provide a little bit of information about the type of tree, and then you can also see the height and where it's located and the score that it got. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes, how we score the trees. What we don't typically do is we don't provide exact locations to the trees that are on our champion or heritage tree list right now. People ask us for that all the time. But what we don't want to have happen is have that tree be damaged in some way because people found it on our website and went. Some of them are on private property also, so they're not accessible to the public. So we don't want to send people to somebody's house to go and find the tree. So when we do things like this, we just sort of say where it is in the county. And that actually mirrors the same process that American Forest does. If you look on their champion tree database, which is totally searchable to the public, you'll see that same information. It says where the county, where the tree is, and then the measurements and the total score. And then there's a couple of pictures of it, just like this, because we want to preserve that. What we are going to try to do in the next year or two, this is one of the things that we've been working on reorganizing a bit, is maybe putting a selected few trees on a map that people can see if they're on Forest Service property or something like that, so that people can go visit them and appreciate them in their space. And we'll have to get permission from the landowner or the homeowner, whoever that is, to make sure that they're okay with it. But look for that in the future. And we hope to be able to kind of strike that balance between the information we can share and the information we shouldn't share. So the next one on the list here was a catclaw acacia, nominated by Jackie Lyle and Nick Shipley, and that is in Pima County. And you can see that this one had a circumference of 111 inches and it was a height of 25.5 feet. And the desert trees are really interesting too, because many of them do not grow to a great height, as we said, but they can still have a pretty big score. So if you think about a circumference, which is the distance around the trunk of a tree that's 111 inches, that's pretty solid. That's a pretty big trunk. And so that's where it kind of makes up the difference with the score in that category. Let's see, what do we have next here? We've got the Arizona Madrone. So here's another one, and that's another picture of Jackie who went out there and verified it for us. This one is in Santa Cruz County, and its circumference is 134 inches and its height is 32 feet. So that one. And then a velvet mesquite in Pima County, circumference 151 inches, a height of almost 40 feet, and a crown width of 75 feet. So that's pretty big also. And then what's this one? A Palo Verde, right? This is the Foothills Palo Verde. This one's over at Savano Nursery. So if you ever shop over there at Savano Nursery, take a look for this Palo Verde tree. I think it's still there. And it's one of the bigger ones that we've got in the database. So there's that one. And then the heritage and witness trees we had on the list for 2020, we had a Sonita, which, as you can see, and as you know, some of the plants here in Pima County, Maricopa County, and Yuma are not trees necessarily. They don't look like deciduous trees or tall pine conifer trees. They're cactus. And we are taking those on our list too. So this one had a height of 17 inches, or no, sorry, 13 feet, circumference of 17 inches, and a total point score of 34. And then last but not least, I think this is the last one I had on here, is the Presidio fig. This one, I believe, is over at Mission Garden, for those of you that are, or maybe it's at the Mercado. It's over by the Mercado part of the Mission Garden. So stop by and take a look at that one. Don't tell anyone I told you where it was. Same thing with Savano, but those are two public spaces. So I think it's okay for you to go and appreciate them if you're in that area. Okay. All right, let's see. So anybody have any questions about the Arizona program, the species that we accept, the kind of the process that we went through to get to this point, anything like that I've described so far?
Lori, can I ask a question?
Sure.
If you have a tree in mind and you wonder if somebody has already submitted it, is there a way to look up the trees that have been submitted?
Yeah, Kathleen's asking the same question as you're asking that. I said in the chat box. The way to do that is to basically submit the nomination, and I will tell you if it's on the list. Because as I said, we don't make that information publicly available for that reason. But if you are somebody that wants to help us and volunteer for the program, I will give you the list of trees, because if you're doing that, then you're going to maybe help me measure the trees, right? And so you would get access to the database that we have, or the ones that are on the map that we've got. So that's how you would find out if it's nominated. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me, is I don't want to discourage people from nominating trees if they think that it might already be on the list, because I want them to go through that process of appreciating the tree and maybe practice measuring the tree and telling us about the tree. To me, that's all about the engagement and the education part. So I think that's also as valuable to me as having, I don't think it's a problem if we've got 2 nominations for a tree. And if we did, then that means that there's more than one person that appreciates it, in my mind. So yeah, I wouldn't approach it that way. I would just say, I really love this tree and I want to nominate it, and I'll put it in there, and then I will let you know if it's the same, if it's already on the list for sure. Yeah, good. Kathleen, did that answer your question too?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim has a question about the velvet mesquite. So yeah, actually that's not the champion velvet mesquite. And the ones that we highlight for the Magnificent Seven, remember, are just ones that were nominated in the previous year. They may or may not have been elevated to champion status yet. And I don't remember without looking about the champion velvet mesquite and how big it was, or if it is the one that's in Patagonia, but we can double check that too, to be sure. So yeah, good question. That's a good question.
Lorianne, this is
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yeah.
Do we have a list of trees that from the past that have been nominated?
Yes.
So that we could look them up and say, hey, this was in 1957 or something.
Yeah, we don't have a list that goes back that far for Arizona, because we only started the program in 2000. So we wouldn't have anything on a list that was nominated or designated earlier than 2000.
Can
Yeah.
we also find out, like, okay, so I live in Tempe. So can I find out, or where can I find out if Tempe has this program? Because you have to have the program, right, before you can nominate the tree, or wrong?
Nope. The program is statewide. So I officially tell you that you have the program.
Okay, that's easy. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a statewide program, and there's trees that are across the whole state. So yeah, for sure. For sure. Good question. Yeah, Kathy, La Cienega has some big trees. There are definitely big trees that are out there that are not documented. We also there's going to be a write-up, I believe, hopefully soon, in the Arizona Highways magazine that is describing this program. So that'll give you a little more detail about the history, because the gal that wrote the article, Catherine Montgomery, spent a lot of time interviewing me and some of the folks that were involved with the program when it started, and has some information in there about it. And the one thing that I told her, which may or may not show up in the article, because you never know how it's going to actually, what the story is she's going to tell, is that just because we have a tree on our list and it's recognized as a champion, doesn't mean that there aren't other big trees out there that maybe are the same species. They just haven't been found yet. And there's also people who say, we've got the biggest, I don't know, saguaro. And maybe they do, but it's not a part of our list, and it's not a part of the American Forest list. So if there's some other group that's curating information, or they just sort of anecdotally think that that's the biggest saguaro in the state, then so be it. But this is like the official state list and the official national list that we are using. To my knowledge, there is no other national registry other than the American Forest Registry. All of those other states, including Virginia that I was describing, everybody plugs into that American Forest database. So yeah, so it's kind of a collaborative effort, but it's also, again, encouraging people to go out and find those trees and tell stories about the trees and measure the trees and engage with them and tell us about them, so that we can maybe document them for better or worse. Okay, good question. Jim says Empire Ranch has a cottonwood that you measured there at 30 feet circumference. Yeah, that's awesome. Some of those down at, Empire Ranch, I haven't been there in a long time, but they've got that cottonwood gallery with all those trees right along the water. It's beautiful. Let's go do a training down there. Let's see. Looks like I have a question. Is there any current plan to monitor trees on the registry on a regular basis? Yes, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So hang on to that question and I will get to it. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you all too, this is hot off the presses-ish. I decided that what I think we need to do is also follow the same kind of schedule that the American Forest Foundation created for their nominations, their annual nominations. Because if we're going to start marketing this program a little bit more, which we are, it's going to get a little bit more unwieldy. The reason why we do have a backlog of trees, which I'll talk about in a minute, is because not only because the pandemic happened and people just kind of shut down being able to go out and do stuff, but because there are so many of those trees on the list, it was hard for my predecessor to go out and measure them all because our state again is very big. It was too big for one person to go around and try to measure those to verify all those trees. And so now I think we're getting retooled a little bit. And instead of like, as soon as the nomination comes in, we don't have the capacity for me or anyone to just run right out and go measure it. I'm going to try to do it in a little bit more of an organized fashion so that there's a distinct time of year that we go out and verify the tree nominations measurements that we've gotten. And then we announce like the list in the fall. Let me see if I can get over on this next slide. So basically, you know, January through September, people can be nominating and we'll be verifying some of the trees. And then at that point, we'll kind of cut it off. We'll do another training in the fall, but we're also going to compile the list of trees that are to be recognized for that previous calendar year. And then we will make that list publicly available on November 1st. And then the nomination period for the next year will start. And that way people understand what the expectations are, because the other thing that happened in the last year and a half that I've been in this role is people had found our information. They did nominate a couple of trees, but then they would write me back the next week. Well, did my tree win? Is my tree winning? Is this? So I think if we just kind of give people the guidelines that you can nominate stuff, but we won't announce a winner until November. And then we'll send out a certificate and you'll be publicly recognized. And that way everybody's kind of on the same page and they know what to expect. So that's my thought in how we're going to organize that. And then that gives the people that are interested in helping us to verify the trees a little bit more wiggle room to go out and actually do that work. Because again, the state is geographically exponentially larger than Virginia was, for example. And so it's a lot harder to get to all those trees, especially if you're talking about only 1, 2, or 3 people that need to be doing the verification. Okay, so submitting a nomination. The other thing that I've spent the last year doing is everything was on a kind of a paper system before, because that's just how stuff was. We migrated it to a form that people can fill out, a Google form. And what we ask people to send us are, a little bit of a description of where the tree is, the GPS coordinates, if they got them, and we've got to be able to find the tree. And then we ask people to send us photos of the tree, like the ones that I have pictured here. And one of the saguaro there on the left with my friend Gabby standing next to it, and that mesquite, I think it is in the middle, those are what we call full form photos. So we want a full form photo of that. It'd be great to have a person standing next to it so that you can get the reference scale. I mean, Gabby's taller than I am. She's probably about 5'8", but that's still a very big saguaro. You can kind of get a sense of that from the picture. We also want pictures from each of the 4 directions of the tree. And we want to grab a picture of somebody measuring the circumference. And if somebody is nominating the tree, we will take as many of those photos as they can get us, right? I think I want to encourage people to give us some cursory measurements of the circumference and maybe the size, if they're able to do that. We're putting together some materials on our website that will help kind of a person that hasn't really done this kind of tree work before, so that they can maybe give us a sort of a general measurement of how big the tree is. And then when we go out, we'll be verifying to see, you know, what the size of it actually is. And so that's kind of the process of the nomination form. So this is what it looks like. It's just a regular Google form on the website. We still do have the paper form available for people that don't want to use an online form. But what I also did to make my life easier, because it's all about me, is I linked the nomination form to our actual database. So when the nominations come in, they're landing in the database already. And then it's all ready to go. So we can print it out and then get ready to go. Verify them or measure them a lot easier than having to create that and type everything up separately. So so that's kind of the process for nominating. Anyone can nominate a tree. Like I said, it doesn't have to be somebody that is trained in measuring. We want to hear from people that are just ready to recognize these trees in their community. So it should be as easy and accessible as possible for people to do that. And then, you know, like I said, we are going to create some materials for people to help them take a first stab in how to measure. And what we want people to do is measure the circumference. As you can see, the gal on the left photo there has a soft tape. She's running around the tree at what we call the diameter at breast height, which is about 4.5 feet off the ground. Taking that circumference in inches, that's one of the measurements that we need. The second measurement that we need is the crown spread. The crown of the tree is the spread of the tree's leaves and branches from tip to tip, what we call the drip line. So that's where the rain is falling on the tree, the water would be dripping straight down from that point. And we actually do two directions with that. So you do like a north and south measurement of the spread and an east and west measurement of the spread. And then we take the average. So that'll give you the average crown spread for that particular tree. And, you know, as you can imagine, some of the trees are way bigger than others. Some of them are going to be easier to measure than others, because especially in the desert, if you remember that picture I had of the mesquite, a full form mesquite that's not been landscaped has branches that are kind of flowing over and down on the ground. And so, you know, this is going to involve kind of getting under there and measuring the circumference of the tree from that perspective. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to measure the height. So I don't know if I clicked on that yet, did I? No, the height, which is the thing on the right there. You can see that gal in the photo is measuring the height of a saguaro. And basically there are 3 or 4 different ways that you can get that. I'll talk about the tools we'll use in a minute. But I also have a description of how people can do that if they don't have any forestry tools. So that's something that we'll hand out to community members to get them engaged in that scientific process of measuring and documenting the tree and sending that information to us. And
Anne?
Kathy has a question. Yes. Is that what you're going to tell me?
Kathy has a question.
Okay.
Kathy Bowman.
Yeah. Is it safe to assume if a tree has a plaque from the forestry department that it's on the list, like the mesquite and Prescott? Yes, it's very safe to assume that. Not all of our trees have plaques. I think there was some funding for that several years ago, maybe in that early period between, I don't know, 2000 and 2012. The Arizona Community Tree Association had plaques that were made and put on the trees. So that one in Prescott that you're thinking of has one. There's several others that do, several heritage trees that do. And then I think there just wasn't a funding source for that. But this is something, again, that we could maybe, if people are really interested in doing that, we could reinstate that, or thinking about what the parameters would be for getting a plaque. Maybe to begin with, they're just the heritage trees that get like a really nice metal plaque on them. I think we do want to start marking them in some way because they're not tagged or marked. We can use a very simple plant tag that is something that's not going to damage the tree, and maybe it's a little inconspicuous so people can't see it and rip it off. So those are some of the things that we'll be thinking about as we move into this like catching up and measurement phase of this process. Good question. Okay, so once we get the nominations in, then we are going to be verifying the trees. And, you know, like I said, what we'll do is we'll have a calibrated group of volunteers that will go out and double check the measurements or take the measurements on the tree. If somebody didn't submit a measurement with the tree in the first place, we'll go out and measure it. and see what the height is. And then the next thing that we'll do is we will calculate the score. And the tools that we use to verify that information are, a tape. Like I said, that's kind of a standard thing. But we also, again, use a clinometer, which is the thing that is pictured on the lower right-hand side of the screen to measure the height. That's a forestry tool that is typically used to calculate the height of trees, just like that gal in the saguaro. We also have things now that are laser measurement tools, which are really nice. They improve the accuracy a little bit for the height, for sure, and for the distance. And the way that I've been doing it and the way that my predecessor, John, has been doing it, we've been using one or two of those tools to kind of calibrate the measurement to see if we're in the ballpark, to make sure that those two things are about the same. I know this is a science experiment and I know it's about accuracy, but I don't want that to be a stumbling block. So if you are going to come to the workshop on Saturday, we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into that concept. But I think the thing that we want to keep in mind is that this is a program, again, for outreach and engagement and education. It is something that we are going to submit to American Forest, and we do need to kind of verify that the verifiers have been trained. But if we're off by a couple inches, I don't think that that is that big of a deal. And maybe people will disagree with me, but I think especially until we get the rhythm of this and we have opportunities to go out and measure the trees and do some practice, I don't want it to be something that is a stumbling block. I don't want it to be something that is kind of a barrier to people for participation. So making sure that we're all on the same page, I think, is going to be important. And having us double check those measurements against one or two different instruments will be important. And we can just kind of go from there. Jim says there's another national program called Monumental Trees. Is there an active connection or some other coordination with that program similar to the American Forest program? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't looked it up. I don't believe it's connected to the American Forest program. Do you know what agency runs that program? Is there an agency attached to it? You look like you're typing.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking for the unmute button.
It's okay.
No, I don't know if there's any type of connection with other programs, forestry programs or state forestry programs. I just noticed that when I was looking for data on trees that that website popped up, and
Okay.
it does not seem as organized as the American Forestry program.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'll take a look at it because maybe they also have something in there about the cultural significance of some of the trees too that we haven't considered. So that could certainly be something that we think about as we're, recalibrating a little bit. If there's something else we want to do in that direction, by all means, I take all comers and I welcome all information. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, here is a map slide, which maybe makes your eyes glaze over, but this is how we calculate the score. So the score is actually the thing that is what gives it a ranking. And as I mentioned, we take the circumference in inches, we take the tree height in feet, and we take the average crown spread on the two cardinal directions, right? And then you take the average and you divide that crown spread by 4. And that is what gets us the total points for the tree. And so that's, again, I think that's a way of sort of leveling the playing field in some senses between trees. And I'm not sure if the American Forest Foundation has gone into a deep dive explaining the formula and the rationale for that. They do have a very thick measuring handbook that I've read, but I can't really remember without looking at it what they described about the preamble for coming up with the score. They also, if you are a math person, they also talk about how you can actually calculate the angles when you're measuring the height. and using some of those tools. So again, I will, if you're coming with us on Saturday, I will send you that information, or I can just send it to everybody that registered for this, and you can read your leisure and get a little bit more of a sense of how some of these measurements are calculated. And so that leads me to our field practice. So if you are interested in moving on with us and you want to become a volunteer for the program, I think there are a couple things that I would like for you to do. We want to have a way that we're calibrating our measurements. Like I said, so I want to have folks practicing that and seeing if we're at least getting in the ballpark of the same numbers when we are out there measuring the same trees, right? So we are having that workshop this Saturday at 8:30, which looks like maybe got cut off on my slide, at Tohono Park. If you didn't already register for that, if you didn't do that through the Tohono website and you want to come, just drop your email address in the chat box here and I'll grab it when I send the information about the workshop to everybody that registered tomorrow. So not a big deal if you didn't do it on the website, but we'll get you in there, and I'll get you the information to get there if you don't know where it is. But we picked Tohono Park because there are 4 trees that are on the registry right now within the park boundary. And so that made it really easy for us to have a couple of trees for people to practice on. It's also a great spot if you haven't been to Tohono Park. It's a beautiful botanical garden here in Tucson, and really interesting trees and things that are in there. And, you know, Elizabeth, I'm not sure when the next field practice day will be held. I think what I'm going to do is I'm definitely doing one every spring, and I'm definitely doing one every fall like this. And I will have the date for the fall one soon. So if you really do want to come, then you can put it on your calendar as soon as you're able. The thing that I don't have the capacity to do is do a bunch of these different workshops for people, like on a one-on-one basis. I just don't have time for that. And plus, I think it's easier if people are in a group and they kind of have a conversation about measuring the trees and they can practice. But what I did do was there are several people that came to our workshop in October that were unable to come today. I wanted them to come for a second time. And I gave them kind of like a field lab homework assignment where I sent them to the Tohono Park on their own. And I asked them to use some of the tools to measure the trees, and then send me their information and I'll score it to see if they're close to the measurements of the trees, and we can kind of work it that way. So that's kind of the variable we need, is we need to have trees that we know the height of, right? We need a place where people can go and do that, where they're all measuring the same tree so that we can be comparing apples to apples when that happens. And the thing that would be lacking in that experience, if you were going to do it on your own, is somebody to show you how to use a clinometer, or show you how to use a laser rangefinder, or show you how to use a Biltmore stick. So, you know, like I said, I might try to do another ad hoc meeting in a couple weeks, maybe, if I can, but I really can't spend every week meeting people to teach them how to use the stuff. And I know it's hard when you pick a workshop date that not everybody can come. There's always going to be something that comes up. So if anybody has any other ideas about how to do that, or maybe we can pair you up with somebody that did do the calibration training to show you how to do the stuff, that would be another option for folks that are interested in volunteering. And maybe, you know, that's a great role for a master naturalist if they're interested in kind of helping get people trained. So yeah, Kathy says the self-guided option would be great. If you already know how to use the tools, I can also try to find, what I can do is find information on how to use the tools, but you would still have to get a tool. You'd have to get a clinometer, you'd have to get a laser rangefinder. If you wanted to purchase those items, like I have done, the clinometers are not as expensive as the laser rangefinders. They are, you know, about $150, so not too bad. We have several that we will use in the workshop that we loaned out, but we can't give them out because we don't want them to kind of walk off. So yeah, we can certainly figure it out, because it's on my radar to help you all if you want to help with this project, to get you up to speed as fast as I can. So okay, I know we're getting close on time, so I'm just going to show you real quick. The Palo Blanco is one of the ones at the Tohono Park. The Sweet Acacia is another one. What do we have? We got the Texas Olive at Tohono, And there's also a date palm, which is not actually the champion because the champion fell down in a storm in the monsoon last summer. So there's another date palm there that we practiced on that was right next to the champion date palm. But anyway, for that matter, those are the 4 trees that we have at Tohono Park. And then the next steps will be, once we get a group of people calibrated on measuring, and we're pretty confident that folks are within the range of being able to measure the height accurately or as accurately as possible, I've got a list of about 50 trees that need to be checked. And so our next step after the workshop on Saturday is going to be to have folks help us by saying, okay, I'm going to go measure the trees in Yavapai County, or I want to do the 2 in Graham County, and just have people sign up for those to go out and check the measurements for us, check to make sure that the tree is still there, because the trees need to be re-verified every 10 years. So some of those trees have been on the list and just need to be checked. And as you know, in Arizona, we've got like wildfires and all kinds of things happen. So the trees may not even actually be there. Some of them might be hard to find because we've got the GPS coordinates, but we're maybe not 100% sure what which the tree is exactly. Some of them might be really off the beaten path and hard to access, but I don't know that because I haven't seen all of them. So I can't really tell you. So it's going to be kind of a little bit of a lift to get us up to speed. We're going to have some of the, hopefully have some of the district forest rangers and some of the forest technicians helping us with that too, because we've recently hired several other people in some of the different district offices that can help us. You know, it would be great if some of those folks are also willing to help teach people how to use these tools to go out and measure the trees and get some of that backlog covered. So that's my intention for the very next steps. And I think that what I will do is, like I said, if you are interested and you're not signed up to come on Saturday, put your email in the chat box here before you sign off. And then I will make sure that I keep you on my short list of people that are interested in helping to measure. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the recording of this talk, and I will also send you the link to the Magnificent Tree Program website, which includes the form. So if you're just interested in nominating a tree or you want to share that information with somebody else, please do send that out. It's publicly available. It's on our website. And we are going to start promoting the program again pretty soon. Again, I'll send you the information for the Arbor Day celebration if you're interested in that. And as soon as that Arizona Highways article comes out, I can send you all a link to that if it's available online. Thank you all for coming. Yay, good. Okay, I see a couple names in there, and I see a forest tech, one of our forest techs. Yay, thank you, thank you. Tell all of your coworkers that we're going to press you into service. And if you wanted to help do a workshop or something, then we'll certainly take you up on that. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for participating in the conversation tonight. You have my contact information there on the internet. I'll send it to you. I'll email everybody. And then even if you didn't drop your name in there, you change your mind later, we'll be happy to have you. So thanks so much, y'all.